subject on the matter, and so we'll go through some of the training techniques that you've seen out there. I'm going to try to put them together in a series that makes sense for most trainers. Us being in Rhode Island, there's not a whole lot of training opportunity around here. There are a few kennels that will do training, not a whole lot of hunting training. So this is kind of a do-it-yourself training. I'm not a trainer by any means, but I have had some good success with my pup. He's about 2 years old now, and his name is Jax, and Jax is not gun-shy whatsoever. He follows all the obedience commands, and we're moving into the more advanced training with placement commands and find commands, blind retrieves, those sort of things. We'll go over all those in the series. So I just wanted to give you a little intro on some of the things that you need to train your dog. Some of the bare necessities. It can get really expensive, so I want to make sure that everybody understands you can do it with the bare necessities. The more training tools you have, the better. But you don't need to go out and spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars getting all these training tools. A lot of them can be made. You can use household items to create some tools for the dog. And some of this stuff is just easy to get cheaper. I use a lot of ropes and things that you can buy at Home Depot or Lowe's or Walmart, fairly cheap. My training stick is cheaper, those sort of things. So I'm going to go over some of the bare necessities, and then we'll go to the second video to start the training. So the first thing I want to do is talk about some of the necessities. So the first thing that you're going to need is a good leash. So this leash is about 18 to 20 inches long. It's a fairly standard leash that you can purchase at any dog supply store. Hoping that after some of these videos, if there's enough need and want for them, some of these products get stocked in some of the local shops. I know of a few that might be interested, so I'm not trying to sell any products here. I'm just showing you kind of what is required to get your dog from point A to point B. So this leash I like because it has this clip here, which allows me to make it larger or smaller, and I can then wrap this around a pole or a tree. Obviously it'd be a little bit bigger if it was wrapped around a tree, but you can basically size it to your need, and that can keep the dog where you want him to be when you're out on in the hunting line. So that's important. That's going to teach him some of the basic obedience stuff that we're going to go over first, probably in the next video. The second thing that you're going to need is a little bit of a longer leash. Again, I try to do things cheaper, so I bought this little clip here. I tied a knot, like a 2.5-inch knot. So those Boy Scouts out there will work great. But basically, this leash is a little bit longer, gives the dog a little bit more freedom, and allows us to get into some of those advanced techniques. After the dog learns what you want him to do, you can get into those techniques and utilize a longer leash. I also have a third leash here. Again, something I made. This one's kind of like half the size of this really long one. This is great for retrieves because you can let it go, and then if the dog isn't coming back to you, you can kind of pull him back to you. This one's more for like longer lead training. It's just a little easier to manage than the extremely long leash. This one sometimes gets tangled up. So those are the three leashes that I use for training. And a lot of guys will have you get double clips and so on and so forth. For some of these leashes, that's not super important. So again, 1 or 2 leashes is usually good. You need at least a long one and a regular size leash, but I like a mid-length as well. The other thing is a good collar. Currently it's on the dog, so I can't really show it to you, but I get the one with the D-ring. That allows them to back out of the collar if they get into a situation where they need to. But my dog has never backed out of his collar. One, he's never needed to, but two, he's generally in forward motion. So there isn't a need for him to back out on a normal everyday basis. So that's his collar that he wears all the time. It also has a tag that's riveted to the collar so he doesn't jingle as he runs, which can sometimes startle animals or make the ducks kind of flutter away if it's not a clean kill. So it's important to have a good quality collar. The one I got is a polymer material, so it doesn't really get wet and stinky like some of the cloth collars, so I recommend those. But again, any collar will do as long as it fits the dog well. You can get a couple of fingers under it, and you can use it for directions. The second collar you're going to need is a stimulus collar, training collar. So some of the important things on the training collar that you're going to want is continuous correction, and some of them come with beep, vibration, and shock. So if you can get one that's all three, great, but at the very minimum you need the shock, and it needs to be continuous, and you'll see why we need that down the road. We do not introduce this collar until after the dog understands what you want him to do. We don't want to confuse the dog with stimulus, but it is important as we get into the advanced training to use a stimulus to let him know that he did things good or that he didn't quite do things to what you wanted him to do. So this one that I got was fairly cheap. I think it was like 25 bucks. Not very expensive on Amazon. They go anywhere from 25 to $500 if you get GPS on it and all that jazz. You don't need to spend a whole lot of money to get your point across. This one's it's called a pet trainer. It's completely waterproof. You can actually hook two collars up to this one device. You can set the shock from 0 to 100, usually much lower than that, like 10, 5, and again, different modes for shock and a light. This one has a sound and vibrate, so this one has 4 modes. But again, this one was fairly cheap on Amazon. If it breaks, I don't really have a problem replacing it for 25 bucks. You can go all out and get like a sport dog collar. You're going to pay a little bit more money for that, but surely they're better quality and they probably have a better range as well. Typically I'm training within 20, 30, 40 yards of my dog, so I don't need like a 3-mile range collar. But if you are going to train for like pheasant or upland game, or if you have multiple dogs that you're using the same collar on, you want to get one that fits your needs. The next thing is your bumpers. So I like to use your typical bumper like this. The black and white is designed for the dog to be able to see it as it flies through the air. So as it hits the horizon, they can see the difference in this color. The orange ones don't really do much for the dog. They do more for humans, because dogs typically see in black and white. So that's just so that you can find your bumpers. And the white ones, like I said, if you're tossing the bumpers, you're tossing it against a bright sky, the dog could lose the bumper as it's being tossed. So I like to get these black and white ones. You can get them pretty much at any sort of sports store that deals in hunting equipment, or you can get them online. Again, those are about 20 bucks each. So it's important to have at least one, but multiples make your life a little easier. And when we get into multiple retrieves, you will need more than one. If you cannot get a bumper because of price, because you don't want to spend $1,000 on your dog while you're training him, you can make these out of like PVC and duct tape, those sort of things. The nice thing about these is that they float. So when we start moving to water, the bumper will float, the dog can grab it and bring it back to you. Some of them have a little relief up here, which allows you to fill it kind of halfway with water, so it'll sit a little bit lower in the water, because as you know, ducks kind of float all different ways when they hit the water. If you are currently a duck hunter, I recommend saving your wings and putting them in the freezer, some Ziploc bags. As we advance through the trainings, it's important to get your dog used to the feather feel in their mouth. So down the road, you'll need those wings to kind of train your dog how to feel that feather. The other thing that I get is a duck bumper like this. This one has a little bit more weight. This one's pretty light. This one's got a little bit more weight. So we'll use this in more advanced training. This will be our starting bumper. We'll graduate to this one. And the reason we do that is because ducks do have some weight to them. And it's important that when the dog is picking the duck up, he understands that he has to hold that weight. It also has this tail, which makes it easier to throw further. And it also kind of flaps around while he's carrying it. So if he's getting whacked in the face by a wing or a tail, it doesn't faze him when we do get into the field. The other thing I like to use is decoys. I brought one out. We have hundreds of them, but I at least recommend getting 6. You should probably have 6 for hunting anyway, at least 6. But like I said, some of the older decoys I'll use, and the reason I use these in training is because I put them out in the yard. I set them up, and I make sure that the dog is going after what I want him to get, and he's ignoring the decoys. When you set up your decoys and you're hunting over a dog, it is important that you make your lines as short as possible so they go straight down from the duck underwater, so that when the dog's swimming he doesn't get tangled up in the lines. If you train him to stay away from those decoys when he's doing a retrieve, then you should have no problems. But things like jerk lines and decoys, when you set them up, you have to have the dog in mind if you're hunting over a dog. I also use cones. Again, you can get these at Walmart. This is to direct the dog. There are some trainings where we're going to set up cones in different patterns and put bumpers next to them, and it just allows the dog to understand where the bumper is. We will add scents and wings to the bumpers down the road, so he knows how to find the bumper and or the duck on a blind retrieve. And so it's important to have a couple of cones. Really, like 2 or 3 is good. I had some obviously for my kids sports, so just a few cones will help. Some optional stuff. Oh, I'm sorry. There's one more required item, which is a stick of some sort, and this is a healing stick. If you were to look up a healing stick, you can buy them for like 30 or 40 bucks. I use a driveway marker, which is pretty flexible. It's not going to hurt if I tap the dog with it. It's got a nice rubber end, so I know I'm not going to poke the dog. So I hold the sharp end in my hand and I use the rubber end to correct him. And this is going to help when you're training the dog to heel, sit, stay, hear commands. You can kind of give the dog a tap, and it just reinforces the command with the dog. So if you want him to sit and you tap him on the butt from behind your back, you can just give him a cool light tap and he immediately knows what you mean. So we'll go over that in some of the future trainings, but this also gives you control. One of the things that is an unknown about dogs is when you start on the small leash or the short leash and you start walking him around and you want him to stay near you, you have to hold your arm pretty far back if he's aggressive and he wants to go in front of you, or you have to hold it way out in front and pull him back. If he's way in front of you, you're going to pull him back. If he's behind you, you're going to pull him forward. But sometimes pulling him back to get him next to you, you have to put your arm way back. And so that's where this check stick can come in handy, because you can use this for the front to keep him in check, or you can use the leash to pull him forward. And again, I'll show that in another video. It's kind of hard to explain in words, but as you see it in action, it'll make more sense. So some of the optional equipment, which is no less important but not required, is a good dog vest. So this one I think I picked up from Cabela's. So this is the Cabela's vest, and the reason I chose this one is it has a little bit of flotation here. It isn't going to keep the dog completely afloat like a life jacket, but it is going to give him a little bit more stamina on really long retrieves. This keeps them warm. Waterfowl hunting is generally in the cold weather, so this will keep them warm. I don't usually bring my dog out like in January when it's icy, but this certainly helps in like November when it's just a little chilly for the dog. Dogs without those undercoats kind of get cold quick and they start to shiver, and hyperthermia is a real thing in dogs just like it is in humans. So the nice thing about these is on the seams there are some reliefs here, so you can cut this to the size of your dog. So you cut basically near these reliefs and it allows you to shape it to your dog. The other nice thing about vests is, aside from the flotation and the warmth, is that as the dog's running through the reeds in a water situation, this protects their chest from getting all scratched up, and it'll prevent your dog from getting hot spots. So another great tool to have, but not 100% required depending on when you're hunting. So that's the basic equipment. The other thing you need is a good sturdy platform. So I have the Marsh blind, which is fairly expensive. I kind of made the expenditure for my dog. I hunt a lot of swamp, so this has telescoping legs, which allows me to get him up out of the water. The bottom is mesh, so the water drips out from here and the dog doesn't get as cold. It also has a camouflage top, which is over there, which I took off for training purposes, that keeps him underneath cover for when the ducks are flying over. So this is sort of his home when we're out in the field, but it is a good training tool. If you don't want to spend the money, that's okay. You want to create some sort of platform. I've seen guys use picnic tables, chairs. I've seen them use a couple of tires with a piece of plywood on top. Whatever it is, you want it to be sturdy enough where it's not going to wobble when the dog jumps on it. I've actually seen guys use the bottom of a climbing tree stand as a platform with a pad on it, so they hook it up to the tree. But you are going to need something that's raised so that we can train the dog how to do a place command. Place is the command you're going to see all over. I like to train my dog with different commands because if I'm in a situation where it's a multiple dog hunt, I want my dog to know that I'm talking to him. I don't want the other dogs to get confused because maybe I didn't train them or something along those lines. So we always use his name to tell him to go. Basically, when it's his duck, his name is the command that I use. And then I use a home command for place. So instead of saying place, I'll say home, and the dog will jump up on here and sit down and wait for my next command. So that's an important tool as well. But again, you don't have to spend that kind of money to get something raised. You can build it yourself. So the last thing that I want to go over is conditioning your dog to understand different scenarios. So socialization when the puppy is young is important. We'll go over gun-shy dogs and training a dog to not be gun-shy. When there's fireworks, my dog goes crazy because he wants to go hunting. He's not afraid of firearms whatsoever at this point in his training. And so it's important that you expose the dog to a lot of different scenarios socially when they're puppies. When they're eating, you can clap above them. They're focused generally on eating, so clapping is kind of the first introduction to noise. If you have kids around the house, that's a great thing because kids and noise are synonymous, and so it's important to expose the dog to noise. Don't pet your dog and console your dog if he starts to get afraid of noise at a very young age, because that just teaches him that behavior is what is expected. So what you want to do anytime there's a noisy situation is play with the dog. So grab his favorite bumper, grab his favorite toy, play with him through the noise. So if you get your dog right before 4th of July and there's fireworks and he's a puppy, instead of him cowering, you want him out and playing with his favorite toy, and sometimes that takes a bit of time, right? You got to sit there basically for the whole fireworks show and play with your dog. Put him inside away from the noise, but definitely play with him through the show so that he doesn't get afraid of that noise. When they're eating, clap above them, make noise. If someone's vacuuming the house, play with the dog during the vacuum session. Don't put the dog in another room, lock him up, and make him afraid of those types of noises, because that's going to translate out into the field, and that's how you get a gun-shy dog. Once you have a gun-shy dog, it is extremely hard to break him if you can break him. So it's important to expose them to noise early and socially put them with a lot of different people. Make sure you're taking them to parties or to friends' houses if they allow it, other dogs. All these things they're going to see in the field anyway, so you want to make sure that they understand what's expected of them when that happens. So what I'm showing you here is my duck call lanyard, because another thing that people fail to do is expose their dogs to duck calls in the off season. And the first time the dog ever hears a duck call is in the blind. So that's not necessarily a good thing for the dog. It's going to confuse the heck out of them. So you want to call here and there and make the dog not react to those duck calls. So if my dog hears this jingle, he knows it's go time. He kind of gets ready. He knows it's work time. If I start blowing the call, he doesn't react to it. He doesn't jump all over me. But that's all done through conditioning. The first few times that he ever hears a duck call, he's going to get really excited and kind of come over to you and try to figure out what you're doing. So it's important that you do those duck calls with the dog. I keep mine in my truck. Anytime I take the dog in the truck, I do a few calls as we're driving down the road, and I don't recommend doing it the first time in the truck because the dog will jump on your lap, but stay safe. But you can start to do the call, and you just kind of stiff arm him into into the passenger seat of the truck or the car and say no when you're doing a duck call and he starts to get a little bit of crazy. He'll certainly learn real quick that that's not proper behavior, and he'll start to ignore those duck calls. And then when you get to the blind, again, that translates to the blind. He's not going to go nuts when there's 10 duck calls around him, you know, all going at the same time. So those are some of the tools. Obviously it's important, I kind of set them all out here. You're not going to use them all in one training session. Most training sessions are going to be 15-20 minutes long, if that. First thing you're going to do is obedience training, which we will go over in the next video series. So I hope you enjoyed the series, and look forward to seeing some of the comments. Thanks.